Executive Sutra. Our special guest today is Kiki Chansamone. He is a creative director and the chief marketing officer for Christine Hair Care. Kiki, thanks so much for being here, and I'm excited to get your insights on creativity. So I want to dive just right in. Can you tell me a little bit more about what it means to you to be creative?
First of all, thank you for inviting me on to your program. And for me, creativity is really about answering a question that pops up. There's lots of different ways to answer a question or to figure out a solution. And creativity is really about how you approach that.
Wonderful. So when do you feel like you are the most creative?
For me, creativity is something that, you don't really stop being creative. I think it's, every facet of your life, you touch upon something creative. If you're walking down the street and you meet somebody, like to me, there's a lot of different ways that you can interact with people. And creativity, like there's some people who ignore the things that are around them, and then there's people who actually engage those things that are around them. And I think when you engage something, that actually is being a creative. I mean, that's actually being reaching inside of yourself and actually finding something that makes you unique. So I mean, those are creative things. That's actually not something, I think that when you see somebody who is really engaging, what you're actually seeing is their creativity coming out as a personality.
I love that analogy, and I love that encouragement to be more engaged in the world around us and being able to witness other people's creativity by their engagement, I guess, really in their own life. So tell me about your recent project with Christine and what you're working on creatively with that hair care line.
Okay. With Christine, actually Christine is a project that I'm, very deeply engaged with. Like, I didn't exactly, I recently joined, sorry, let me start over.
That's okay.
Okay, Christine is actually something that's very close to my heart. And because it does mean a lot to me, I mean, I've been looking to really make it into something special. And so, from a creative place, when something really means something to you, it sometimes is hard for you to take a step back and really assess exactly what you want to do with it, because you start going, I don't want to mess it up, and those are the things that sometimes I think with a product that is close to your heart, you really have to believe in what it is, right? Like anything that you believe in, you're willing to shout it from the rooftops. And that's where I am with Christine. It's like, I know it's the best product out there, and you want to make the best impression. So when you're doing that, sometimes you're afraid of doing something that's that's going to compromise it. And that's kind of something that I find myself like, I don't want to say too much. I don't want to sound like I'm bragging about this thing, but it's like something that is so spectacular that it's almost okay to brag about it, because it's something to brag about.
I can hear the passion in your voice about this project, and I know for myself it's an amazing product. That's all I use for my shampoo and conditioner and the hair glaze as well. So I benefit from you bringing that out into the market and from your integrity with the quality of the product.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, actually, one of the things that is really special about Christine is that it's we wanted to make it about community here in California, and also something that's really authentic. So we made sure that everything was sourced out in California, is manufactured in California, and I feel like to me, if you really believe in a product and you believe in what you're doing, you want to give it everything that is of the highest caliber. And I wouldn't have introduced it to you if I didn't believe in it. And then, and I love the fact that you actually tried it and that it really works for you, and that's what we're seeing is that, it works really well for everybody. But, there's a very different thing between marketing a product and actually having a great product, So right now we're approaching it from, we do have a great product. Now we really need to elevate our marketing to match that level of quality.
I like what you said about marketing and product and how those two interplay, but you really need both. And it's interesting, you said that it really works. And that made me think about your comment earlier about a question being the part of creativity. Like, what is a question and problem solving? So I assume with Christine, you were setting out to solve a problem or enhance the benefits with shampoo and conditioner and the body care as well.
You're right. Yeah, actually, it's funny because when we set out, I mean, the product line was actually launched by my father-in-law, Van Thomas, who has had 40 plus years in the industry, and he had a specific agenda. Like, he wanted to make sure that, like, that you're not just buying a product that is going to superficially improve your hair, but this product actually rebuilds your hair from the inside out. So I mean, it's legitimately creating the healthiest hair that you're ever going to have. And when you make something like that, like for us, it was, it's something that's really special, but it's not necessarily the most, it's not the sexiest, idea, right? It's like, I'm fixing hair. It's not necessarily the sexiest idea. So you see a lot of products that are much, they sell the glamour, they sell, an image that doesn't necessarily translate to the performance. But that's the thing, is like, like there's a fine line between being able to create something that gives an impression, and I think that's where, since we're talking about creativity, that's what defines products sometimes, is that it's not necessarily, like, I love that people are very creative with their ideas and how they market. But like, you wish in some ways that, like, people would be honest about, like, how their performance of their products are.
Yeah, it's an interesting field for sure. And I know you've worked with many creative types, not only with Christine, but you have your own post-production company, you're an entrepreneur, you're an illustrator, you did comic books back when you were a teenager. So you really are living the creative life. And what tips do you have for people in terms of how they can boost and harness and maybe even show off their own creativity?
Actually, I'll tell you, when you're talking about creativity, I think a lot of people get scared off by the idea that they're having to compete against somebody, who has different ideas. The fact is that we do have different ideas, and that's what makes it, like, really unique. I mean, that's, like, you may have an idea that somebody else hasn't conceived of, but, like, in your mind, it might feel minor. It might feel like, it's not grand enough, And what I like to tell people is that creativity is really not about the grandness or like, going completely off the reservation. It really is about, like, tweaking ideas, Like, some of the greatest innovations are really just tweaking of ideas. They're not wholesale changes of concepts, I mean, you look at, the wheel. Maybe, like, somebody, the caveman made a wheel, and it wasn't quite as round as the wheels that we know today. It's chiseling away at that wheel that makes it, more refined. And sometimes that's what's really the innovation. It's not necessarily the initial thought, but it's that little, 5% tweak, the last 10% tweak that really sells something. I mean, I look at things like MySpace versus Facebook. It's like, like they're very similar in some, in a lot of ways, but, like, one takes off and the other doesn't. They're little tweaks that happen that that really creates a new format that wasn't conceived of initially.
That's really true, and it reminds me of Uber. Uber is basically taxis, but it's a tweak to the business model and who picks you up. And then it completely democratizes that process so that anyone can get a ride and also give a ride and also create community. So speaking of the little tweaks and the iterations and creating community, what has it been like to collaborate with others in the creative space, and what does that mean for you?
It's funny because when you're dealing with creatives, and there's always going to be personalities. There's different personalities in every field of business. So and creatives are in a lot of ways, like, I like to think of, like, being an artist or being a creative as then you're opening up your soul. right? Like you're giving of something that is deeper than just a peripheral. You're not engaged in counting dollars or whatever, right? I mean, you're actually giving of something that is like, an idea that didn't exist before. And when those things happen, I mean, that's a very powerful piece that, like I can't say enough about people who openly give all their ideas, because, like at the end of the day, you're exhausted because you're going like, I spent all this time coming up with, concepts, right? And when you're working with these agency creatives and things like that, you're sitting in that environment where everybody is very much collaborative, and it's a beautiful thing, but it's also very draining at the end of the day, because like you're all it's not necessarily the stuff that you really want to be creative about. Like everybody has a dream, and that dream is separate from what you work on. And when you're working, that work requires the same amount of energy and vigor and a focus, but it's not necessarily the thing that you want to focus on, but you do it, because the projects that you work on with people are just as important to them as your own personal project, and you have to kind of remember that.
So that's one way to look at the dynamic between kind of responsibility and creativity. And we all have obligations. We all have things that are just required in life. And then we have our passion projects. There's a thought that when you start to work on a passion project and it becomes your work, that it loses some of the joy. How do you feel about that?
It's funny because there's definitely going to be projects where it's not exactly in your wheelhouse, right? Like there are things that excite me. I love horror films. Anything that has atmosphere and things like that excites me. But you look at it and from my perspective, it's like these projects that people bring to you. These are things that are important to them, And I hate the feeling of like not giving your full focus, because like when it's like having taking care of somebody's small child, that's it's not your child, but the importance of this child. I mean, like you can't just like not pay attention, right? I mean, you have to make sure that the kid is fed, that they get some activities, that they're engaged with fun things, whatever. But and I think that's how I approach anytime I work on a project. Is I don't think of it as I'm working on something. I actually think of it as this is somebody's lifeblood, and I need to make sure that we give them the same focus that I would give to something that I actually believe, that I work on, or that's coming from my own heart.
Yeah, keeping that passion going, whether it's your project or someone else's, being equally committed, equally passionate, really helps to bring something to life. And I loved what you said earlier about the soul of creativity, and that creativity comes from the soul. How do you peel back those layers or stop suppressing your creativity if you're someone who says, oh, I'm not creative, or I've never been creative, or my parents said it's not okay to be creative?
Yeah, well, and I'll be honest, like, growing up, I'm Asian, and and my family has always been, very much about education, and like we take great, we put great emphasis on, being a doctor and a lawyer, the very traditional things that you want your kids to become, and and what happens is that you start to devalue the things that make you unique. Like I've always thought of myself as being creative, but it's you start to push that aside because you want to fulfill other somebody else's expectations. And I like for people who feel like they don't have this creative ability, I actually say I relate it to hands. I always say that like creativity is it's like having hands that, you know that your hands can actually create a multitude of things. You know, it can, you can create, you can point your finger, you can, you know, use your palm to push somebody, you can use your hand to pull something back, you know, you can actually make a fist. I mean, there's a lot of things that your hands can do. I mean, there's innumerable things. And so everybody has these abilities, but it's just you know, how you use them and when you use them. You know, I think a lot of times people are afraid to use these hands. You know, they go, I know that I have, you know, the ability to do these things, but do I deserve to do it? Or do I, you know, like, why are these hands as special as somebody else's hands? You know, and I think that that's the one thing that holds a lot of people back, is that they don't feel like, you know, that these tools that they have, these abilities that they have, are as worthwhile as somebody else's, and that's, you know, unfortunate.
What I hear you saying is recognize and utilize the tools that you have, and step away from the comparison game. Instead, focus on your own unique talents and gifts and start honing those. So we're gonna wrap it up, but I wanna see first if you have any other tips for adding more creativity into your business or into your life.
Sure. You know, when it comes to business, I tell people that you're much more creative than you actually think, you know, and sometimes in business there's, you know, people think that it's lacking in creativity, but actually it isn't. You know, we talked about it a while back, that things as simple as downsizing, you know, like when the first person who was, you know, their business was having problems, you know, they're losing money, you know, the initial thought is, I'm going to shut down my business, you know. And there's other ways that you can do things, like, you know, you know, people have been exploring different ways to grow their business, but also, like, you know, even in times of stress, if you're downsizing, you're not necessarily giving up the ability to, you know, to do business. You're actually giving yourself another chance by, you know, simplifying what you have, right? And that's creative. You know, like those are solutions to a problem that you have that initially you don't think that you have an answer for. And I always say, you know, like that's what creativity is. It's like finding this problem that you didn't know you had, and then now all of a sudden you've got to figure out what that answer is. And if you use these tools, and then, you know, like I can't emphasize enough, it's like we all have these tools. You know how to resolve these things. It's just a matter of allowing yourself the you know, the leeway to make the correct or wrong decisions. You know, it's okay. I mean, but it's still creative. Whether you know, the end result is not the point. It's really about trying to come up with a solution.
That focus on the process and not on the outcome, I think, is so important. Even though we get very goal-driven and outcome-focused in business and in all the areas of our life, you know, when we commit to our practice, whether it's a creative practice or a meditation practice or a practice of spending time with your family, then you can actually flourish with your creativity. And I know that we spoke before about when you have constraints, sometimes the actual constraint or the habit or the discipline can unlock being more creative, because that pressure focuses you and helps you to be even more innovative, kind of twist things in order to get to a solution.
I love that. No, that's absolutely true. I mean, it's you know, I love business, and I also love being creative, and they're not that far apart. They really are not. You know, you can be an incredibly creative person and flourish as a business person. I think sometimes, you know, people think that you have to be one or the other, but it's actually, you know, all of it is mixed together.
Fantastic. And I feel similarly about spirituality and business, that we can be living from our soul, our creative spirit, and also be flourishing in business and with what we're expressing creatively in the world. So thank you, Kiki. This has been really wonderful.
Well, thank you again for inviting me on.
Of course. I encourage all the viewers to check the blogs that we've been writing. Kiki and I had a great interview a few weeks ago. There's some blog posts on the Executive Sutra website as well as LinkedIn. And check out the other webinars from our innovation series with Executive Sutra. So thank you, Kiki, and have a great night.
You too. Thank you.